Welcome to the number 2 in the Battles of Lincoln Castle. We looked at 1141 last week. This is part 1 of 1217. Lots to talk about today, and the last one will be 1644, and that's me. We'll talk about 1217 today. That helmet, unfortunately, is about 200 years too late, and the glasses are completely wrong. My name's Eric, and I will be taking you through this battle. The second battle of Lincoln in 1217, and there's a lovely illustration of the battle and the castle, and the besieging troops being chased away by the crossbowmen. So why is there a battle in 1217? Well, it's all about King John, worst king ever. Barons rebelled against him, and the Magna Carta and all that. John was awful, but there wasn't a good, decent alternative. He'd had Arthur of Brittany, his nephew, murdered. His son was a young child, and so the rebels that were rebelling and fighting against John and his terrible government invited the son of the King of France over, Louis, who later became Louis VIII of France. So he lands in May 1216, and in October, John, been fighting a running sort of war with him, does everyone a favour and dies at Newark Castle at night in a storm. So this leaves Louis with control of most of the country, and Henry III being a 9-year-old child. Now luckily there's a guy called William Marshal, and he's a bit of a dude, and he'll come through this story again and again and again. He's in Gloucester in the West Country. He goes north, John's funeral, and then goes and finds the 9-year-old Henry and brings him back to Gloucester Abbey, where Peter de Roche, the Bishop of Winchester, crowns him using a borrowed gold crown from Henry's mum, because mums always have gold crowns lying around in their handbags. But the coronation feast is interrupted by news of battles and fighting. There's fighting going on. And although they've got control of Gloucester, they haven't got control of the rest of the... So Henry, who he got to help him secure the throne, William Marshal, the Earl of Pembroke, the most important and most famous knight ever. The Bishop of Winchester, Peter de Roche, is French. He's not the sort of bishop that'll end up on Thought for Today on Radio 4. He's a sort of bishop that would go to war. Nicola de la Haye, she's very important. She holds Lincoln Castle for Henry, and it's quite rare in medieval times to have a castle under control of a woman, so she must have been quite a strong and powerful lady. The Earl of Chester, he's a bit of a loose cannon. The Pope would send out his legate, and basically Gualabichere turns the thing into almost a crusade. And Fawkes de Barate, who's a soldier who's come up through the ranks under John and supports John's son Henry. Fawkes de Barate has a hall in South London called Vauxhall. Vauxhall also lands in Luton, and allegedly it's his heraldic griffin, which is on every single car made by Vauxhall. There you go. On the other side is Louis, the son of the King of France. He's being surreptitiously supported by his father, and also the young Thomas, the Count of Perche, but also lots of English rebels like Robert Fitzwalter, Gilbert de Gant, Sayer de Quincy. These are rebels who had forced John to agree to the Magna Carta. They were part of the Committee of 25 that was meant to uphold the Magna Carta, and they'd been fighting against John and his oppression since 1212. There's lots of different sources. I've gone through most of them myself, so I won't tell you all about them now. But the most important ones are things like the Chronicles of St Albans. It's mainly Roger of Wendover. He was a prior of Belvoir, so he knows the local area. And Matthew Paris, who basically rewrites Roger of Wendover, but brilliantly Matthew of Paris. He's Chronicle has pictures. So a lot of the pictures you'll see are taken from Matthew Paris's. And the one down the bottom there, the L'Histoire de William le Marshal, it's a poem about the life of William Marshal, and it gives us loads of details that we wouldn't know otherwise, but it's very sort of pro-William Marshal. As you can tell from the title, it's in French because most of the aristocracy at that point spoke French. So, Louis in the south, Henry's based in the west. There's a few outliers that Henry's still got: Dover Castle, Lincoln Castle, Nottingham, Newark. It starts off with the Earl of Chester basically going on a private sort of war and trying to take on Sorrel Castle in Leicestershire. Louis is then asked to send a group of knights north, which he does under Thomas the Count of Perche, but Louis stays in the south. So although this battle is fought in Louis' name, Louis in the south of England, not at Lincoln at all. Okay, they march north. Ranulph goes, "Oh dear, I'm outnumbered," so retreats to Nottingham. And then a message arrives, and Louis' forces that he sent north under the Count of Perche in Leicestershire hear that Gilbert de Gant is besieging Lincoln Castle. They've got the city of Lincoln, but not the castle. It's held by Nicolas de la Haye. So Count of Perche goes, "Right, let's go north and help them." Now William Marshal, who is the young Henry, 9-year-old Henry's chief supporter, knows he's completely outnumbered by Louis. He's completely outnumbered even if Louis' army is split in two, but he stands a better chance against half of Louis' army than all of Louis' army, so he gambles. And in these days, big set-piece battles are rare. You raid enemy territory, you don't have a set-piece battle. William Marshal decides to roll the dice. He and the Earl of Chester at Nottingham, they say to all their supporters, "Meet us at Newark Castle. We'll see if we can defeat half of Louis." Now, they're at Newark and they march north towards Lincoln. And this is an interesting piece of evidence. I thank Catherine Murphy for this. It's a new computer wizardry whereby you can work out what can be seen from other places. So basically, the grey areas you can't see from Lincoln, from the upper city of Lincoln. The pinky orange bits you can. So William Marshal's troops, they assemble, spent 3 nights at Newark, move up north, camp overnight somewhere between Stowe and Torksey, and the light from the fires of that camp would have been seen by the Count of Perche and the French and the rebels in Lincoln. Now, William Marshal then suddenly appears, and the French and the rebels don't go out and fight him in the open countryside. They get caught in a street fight where their superior numbers can't be brought to bear. Now, Lincoln's up on a ridge. Why didn't they stop him going up a ridge? Well, if you look at the approach that William Marshal took, there is a blind spot above Lincoln to the sort of north-northwest where this ridge is. If William Marshal had marched north, they would have gone, "Oh, he's not coming to Lincoln," and then gone up the ridge where this blind spot was. He could approach from the northwest along this blind spot, and they wouldn't have known until it's too late. So, a bit of speculation there using new computer evidence. There's a lovely song called "The Taking of Lincoln," and it talks about the sun touching the earth with the first light, but the trumpet had given the flourish, and the leaders move iron war. Many were the standards you might see with tremulous flight above the nodding helms, and the hives of Christ sent forth the iron-girt bees of war. This is William Marshal's army gathering up and marching to Lincoln. So, William Marshal, supporters of Henry III, approach from the northwest. The city is controlled by Thomas the Count of Perche and the English rebels. They control the city, but not the castle. Remember, the castle's under Nicolas de la Haye, who supports Henry III. And the brilliant thing, if you're besieged in Lincoln Castle, is one of the gates, the west gate, goes into the countryside. So you can send messages out to a relieving force coming to your rescue, and a relieving force can send troops back in. Now, William Marshal approaching from the north meant he was fighting downhill, and if you know Lincoln, you know you do not want to fight uphill. So the barons and the rebel barons and the French look out, they laugh at the William Marshal's army and continue to attack the castle. Go, they ain't going to cause. Reconnaissance are sent out from the castle through this west gate, and Fawkes de Brouat sends his crossbowmen through the west gate and go and reinforce the people in the castle and go on the castle walls, firing their crossbows. Now, by firing their crossbows, they're knocking the French knights to the ground, making them less mobile. Then Fawkes de Brouat has a bit of a rush of blood to the head and decides to take on the whole of the French and rebel army, goes out the east gate of the castle into the square outside Castle Hill, nearly gets captured by his enemies, and his mates have to go out and drag him back into the castle. They need reinforcements. William Marshal then is about to go into battle. Now, William Marshal has been fighting in tournaments and various things all through his life. But he's 70, and when you get a bit older, sometimes you forget things. You know, my dad's always going out of the house and forgetting his phone or his glasses. So there you go. He's about to go into battle, and someone says, a young lad says, "You haven't got your helmet on." And William Marshal goes, "Oh, I haven't got my helmet on." In these days, they were wearing chainmail with big helms on, and the helms like a big metal bucket with eye slits on it. Now, William Marshal's troops go through multiple gateways and breaches through the wall, and the walls of Lincoln are not the big defendable things they'd been in Roman times. They're quite run down. Now, the big turning point, Roger of Wendover says that they surround the leader of the French, Thomas Count de Perche, and he said he wouldn't surrender to the English, who were traitors to the lawful king. In his mind, the lawful king is obviously Louis, and a knight rushed and pierced his brain, and he fell to the ground. And quite a lucky or unlucky shot, depending on your point of view, to be able to get a knife or a sword through the eyepiece of one of these helms. In the life of William Marshal, it talks of Thomas Count de Perche and William Marshal meeting outside the cathedral, and the Thomas Count de Perche raining blows down on William Marshal's head and denting William Marshal's helmet. So it was lucky. He remembered his helmet in the end, otherwise he would have had his head caved in. Thomas Count de Perche dies, and the French and the rebels lose heart, and as they're pushed out of the city, there's anecdotes of trouble they have getting through the various gateways. There's talk of a cow getting stuck at one point. There's William Marshal's son's bannerman, who holds the sort of flag or banner of William Marshal, gets so excited when chasing him out the city that him and his horse bounce off the group of knights are all bunched together, and he ends up in the river. I'd like to point out horse and rider were both unharmed by this quick dip. Now, after the battle, what you do after the battle, as I said last week in 1141, is you just plunder the whole city, which is what they did. They plundered the whole city. And then Roger of Wendover says that this battle, in derision of Louis and barons, is called the 9-day. Now, the 9-day, Roger's writing in Latin, the 9-day has usually been translated as fair. And this happened, this translation happened originally about a century and a half ago, where people thought, because they plundered the city, it's like a fair. You get the fair and you come back with lots of goods. You go, hey, this is what I got from the fair. But plundering a city happens after every medieval battle. It's like saying, oh, that was the trolley shopping trip because we used a trolley around the supermarket. And someone going, hang on a minute, don't you use a trolley every time you go to the supermarket? So saying, oh, it's the one where we plundered the city, someone would be going, but don't you plunder it after everyone? 9-day did later become the word for a fair, because fairs grew up outside tournaments. its tournament in 1217. This is what it means. And a tournament is like a mock battle. So in derision of Louis and the barons, they're saying, we duffed you up, we won the battle. And it wasn't even a real battle. It was like a mock battle, and we still won. So I think a better translation of 9 Day, the more accurate one, is the Tournament of Lincoln. But I don't think I'm going to change everyone's mind. There's too many books printed with fair on it, unfortunately. And people talk about air battle between the English and the French, and I've gone through all the different chronicles and found a list of everyone that was captured. The foot soldiers and the everyday knights might have been quite a lot of them French, but this is a list of the French that fought. On the right, you can see a huge long list of people that were English rebels who fought with the so-called French. So when we talk about English versus French, remember a lot of the French are English rebels. And hang on a minute, 2 of the English, the Bishop of Winchester, Peter de Roche, he's French, and Fawkes de Boissy, he's French. So 2 of the English are French. Who won the battle? You can't really say the English defeated the French because there was a lot of French on the English side, a lot of English on the French side. Could you say Henry III defeated Louis? Well, Henry III was 9 and was in Nottingham at the time, and Louis was down south, so neither were there. You could say the Royalists defeated the rebels, but who's a Royalist and who's a rebel? The supporters of Henry III are only Royalists, not rebels, because they won and Henry III became king. And Louis is not lost, and so Louis' supporters are ultimately seen as rebels rather than the Royalists. So perhaps we can just say William Marshal defeated Thomas, the Count of Perche. Little epilogue. Do you remember Nicola de la Haye, who controlled the castle? Well, she has about 3-4 years running battle with William Longspay, the Earl of Salisbury, who fought in the battle on Henry III's side to try and get control of Lincoln Castle. Eventually, William Longspay drops his claim, and she gets to retire in 1226 after a spirited defence of the castle, and is buried down in the south of the county at Swayton, which is the church pictured there. Thank you for listening. I'd like to say with the images, we've tried to use ones that are copyright free in the public domain, or we hold the copyright to. If we've inadvertently used an image you believe you hold copyright to, we apologise. Please contact us regarding this matter. That's it for this lecture. Next week is 1217 part 2. What happens next? Louis is not completely defeated. He might have a little bit of a comeback, who knows? And then the week after, that would be 1644. Thank you for listening. My name's Eric Grigg, and this is a series of little talks about the history of Lincoln Castle.